Hello, welcome to the Sales Development Revolution video series. In this episode, we're going to discuss how the process behind sales development has changed over the last 5 to 10 years and what organizations can do to modernize their SDR function.
Yeah, this is a big topic, AJ. The reps that you hire and the technologies that you use can really only take you so far as a manager. And I think a lot of companies run into this challenge where they let the people and the technologies that they use define their entire process.
Exactly. And it really should be the other way around. To generate consistent results, managers need to clearly define processes that they put in place for their SDRs and be mindful of how they impact the underlying sales math of the role.
Yeah, exactly. So to share his thoughts on the topic, we invited Ryan Reesert, co-founder and CEO of the Sales Developers and author of the book, Outbound Sales, No Fluff, to join us in a discussion.
Yeah, if there was only one thing I could take away from our conversation with Ryan, it would be the importance of putting the right process in place before diving into the hiring and training processes.
Well, AJ, good thing you're allowed to have more than one takeaway.
You're right. Let's jump on in.
So to kind of cue us off, what I really find funny about this process conversation is the fact that most companies would rather rely on new people or new technologies to improve their outcomes, even though we all know that's not enough. And when outcomes inevitably don't meet those expectations, they just blame those same people and those same solutions and then find new ones to fill the gap. And this continues and continues until at some point these companies have to look at that process for their answers. So in terms of sales development for the managers in the audience, how has the process changed for you over the last 5 to 10 years for SDRs?
Yeah, so great question. I love that you're starting with the people, technology, process. Those three things come up all the time. We talk about it over and over and over again. It's how we launched our company here. And to your point, prevailing wisdom 5-10 years ago is you want to increase sales. Well, you start by increasing your sales headcount, right? Double sales, double headcount, find great people. And then with the emergence of modern technologies, go out and buy the tools, CRM, DiscoverWorks, ZoomInfo, whatever you want to call it. 5-6 years ago, maybe it was like Yesware. Now it's like the Outreaches and the Sales Ops of the world. And so you got the people, they've got the technology, go. But the process piece has always kind of been missing in sales development. Outside of maybe you have the person, you have the technology, here's a phone, here's a list, go. There hasn't been a formal process developed for, who are the accounts we should be targeting in the first place? Do we all agree that if I engage with this account, that's somebody we want to be engaging with as an organization? And within those accounts, who should we be taking meetings with and why? And that's where there's so much debate in sales development. If you look back 5 to 10 years of like the quality of the lead, and one of the biggest challenges leads, quality and quantity, and everyone's always debating like, hey, that's not a good lead. Well, because you have no process around account selection and who you want to talk to in the first place, that debate's going to continue to come up, right? So what I'm seeing, and definitely what we preach, is to kind of rejigger that equation and start with process. Enable that process with modern technologies, and then once you've nailed that, find the right people. And over here, our little tagline is double, sales without doubling headcount. So when you put process first, and you have technology enabled to give you the metrics and insights around what's working and what's not working, then you can find the right people to grow your business. And that's kind of the change I'm seeing in the modern sales development environment.
And I think deep down that kind of makes sense for everybody when you really think about it, because we've been taught that foundation is obviously it's a foundation because it's the thing you built first, and you can't really build anything on top of a foundation if it's crumbling. So the analogy that I've heard a lot of people use is all right, you're building a house. And when you want to build a house, you want to make sure you have high quality materials. You want to have good wood, good brick, whatever you're building it with. Like, but if you don't think about the foundation first, it doesn't matter how high quality those materials are, your house is going to fall down. So the same thing, you can obviously analogize that to the sales development function in the sense that you can't just give some new college graduate a desk and a list and a phone and expect them to go get meetings for you anymore. It's something that I guess kind of worked at some point in the past, but now the environment has changed, how we're targeting companies have changed, and how people are researching and understanding products have changed. So with that, you need to build out the process for sales development. And I know that a lot of organizations are working on that. And it's sort of akin to how we saw closing sales processes being built. So a lot of sales reps have these, whatever, Sigma 6 technology or black belt, I don't even know them. They exist for those reps, but like we're seeing stuff like that develop for SDRs. Do you think that there's going to be some kind of like Sandler method or whatever for SDRs at some point in the future? Are we building that now?
Well, I sure hope so. Rex and I, that was kind of our purpose of putting the bucketing system in our book, Outbound Sales, No Fluff. There's been so much time, energy, and effort committed to the meeting. So once we're across the table from each other, right? You and I, we sit down, Sandler, Miller Hyman, you've got Medic, MedPick, whatever, force management, all these, billion-dollar sales training industry. But you go into an organization that's really growing a modern sales team, you'll get that training, right? They're going to teach you, hey, what's the qualification criteria? How does a discovery meeting work? What's stage definition, exit criteria? And you get hammered on that. But there's nothing really before that, right? It's just like, well, leads will come in, it's just cold call or you've got the inbound. And so that's where we're hoping more and more of this comes up. There are some folks that have, Marketo and Engagio with the whole account-based marketing concept and the flipping the funnel, that all ideas kind of helping us get closer towards a process because, you kind of hinted this already. You're building a house. If the foundation is poor, the results are going to be poor. Like your house is going to crumble. In sales development, if you choose the wrong accounts and wrong contacts, nothing else matters, right? If I can't help the organization I'm selling to and the person within that organization I'm trying to sell to doesn't care, I will not have a closed won deal. And so when you think about the process of sales development, the need for clear definitions of stages and exit criteria from account selection, the messaging to them, why they should care, and not features and functionality, but what's the benefit of them joining and learning and taking that journey to get them across the table. That's where the real opportunity is, I think, in sales development. And I'm hoping we see more and more of that come up from other folks in the future here.
That is awesome. And I wanted to get into this bucketing methodology that you have mentioned in the book. So, some of those in the audience might not have read it. So could you just go through it and maybe summarize kind of that account selection process before they begin to talk about messaging, before they can start researching, how do you go through this bucketing process?
Yeah, absolutely. So without getting too detailed here, it's simple but complex. But the bucketing system starts with it's 4 buckets. So the names of those buckets: uncontacted, working, priority, meeting scheduled. You can call them whatever you want: cold, warm, hot, whatever you want. But you've got uncontacted leads. These, in the very, very beginning of a process, should be accounts. You target accounts, you sell to people. So accounts and what we call your swim lane, or what others might call your ideal account profile or your ICP, ideal customer profile, whatever it is, right? Companies that you can help because they meet some sort of researchable or trigger-based criteria, right? Size, geography, technographics. They're using certain systems that you integrate with. Other triggers. They're hiring a certain number of people. They just took funding. There's a merger or acquisition, whatever it might be, right? So there's signals and information about the account itself that should meet the criteria in bucket 1. And only when you move forward in this process, you should only engage accounts that meet that criteria. based on research, before you even start any activities towards it, if it doesn't meet those criteria, just get them out. And I don't care if that's inbound, outbound, whatever, that should be bucket one. Only accounts that meet that criteria. And then within those accounts, the person at the organization, the person or the role within the organization who owns the decision on that product or service that you offer, right? So the problem you solve or the innovation that you're bringing, who within that organization? Now, there's a lot of debate around that, right? Especially when people say in the enterprise, like you could start in all these angles. I think that's actually not true. I believe that there is one person who really does care in that organization. Now, that could be the champion or whatever, but start with the one from a hypothesis that is either going to get promoted or is going to get fired if you don't, help them solve or, or educate them on the innovation there, right? So, target the accounts and only move through the buckets with that criteria. That's bucket one, okay? Bucket two is, once you've had those folks researched, is you're starting to validate the information associated with them. So they only move forward into bucket two when you've made an outbound attempt in a channel. So you're validating channels over the phone, over the email, over social, whatever, new channel you might want to use, text, chat, in-person events, whatever. It's a validated channel. If it's the phone, which we're phone heavy, you've actually made an attempt to the person. You've documented the path towards that attempt. And if that number gets to them, it is now in bucket two. If it doesn't move into bucket two, right? So a working lead is only channel validated. If you sent an email and it bounced, it's not working yet. You don't have a channel validated lead. And then bucket three is, I've actually engaged with them on a channel. So I've had a conversation over the phone. It didn't move forward to a meeting yet. They asked for information or whatever. Somebody came inbound and they requested some information, and we started a conversation over email. I've sent an email, they responded. We did a chat bot or whatever. That's bucket three, priority, and you have a channel validated where you can engage with them. And then finally, bucket four is those folks that have actually calendared an event with you. Now, when you start your day as an SDR, you work these buckets backwards. So you go in and you confirm all your meetings. And then you go in and you re-engage everybody that you've already re-engaged with in the channels that you know that's validated in order to try to drive them forward. Once you've completed all of those tasks, then you move into your working tasks. So you can pull up a list of 80 validated numbers and blast through that. I don't care if you have automated tools or not. You could do 80 outbound validated dial attempts in an hour. People think that's crazy. No, you can do that easily if it's channel validated. Then you move up to net new research and bringing them through. And if you're consistently filling these buckets, there's some conversion ratios associated with dial to connect and success metrics that will give you this replenish formula. And over a period of time, 3, 6, 12 months, you'll know exactly how many leads you need in each bucket at any given time to drive what you call your math of sales. Math of sales is how many conversations do I need to have a next conversation? How many next conversations do I need to get a meeting, and how many meetings drive into pipeline? Once you solve that formula, you'll know exactly how to operationalize sales development. And that's the whole concept of bucketing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it might be difficult for a lot of companies to sort of wrap their heads around at first, but it really does make a lot of sense when you talk about enabling processes like this and sort of having that in place before you staff a team and before you really action anything. Like understanding that these buckets and this process needs to be set before acting on it is important, because things will change. But I also know a lot of organizations use their SDRs and sort of the anecdotal and metric-based information that they're getting on a daily basis to influence what industries they're reaching out to. And maybe that shifts up the buckets. How do you sort of take that approach when you have SDRs who are sort of changing up how your process is in place? Is it a work in progress with the process, or are you like a staunch, this needs to be in place beforehand and you can't change it kind of person?
Well, so the process is a process, but the hypotheses that you run within that process, that's the whole point of sales development, right? You're always testing, you're always trying new, bucket one, what is the definition? But for this particular campaign, as I run this series of buckets that's going to fill my funnel, it needs to be clear, defined, and consistent. And when you have that clear, defined, consistent swim lane, then you have clear, defined messaging and an offer, and you're going to run it all the way through. And in this way, that list of leads that are going through the buckets, your math of sales doesn't lie. right? When we go after this particular segment with this particular message, it takes, you know, this many activities to get a conversation. It takes this many conversations to get to next conversations. And here's our conversion rates. Is that a viable segment or not? Is that a viable industry? Is it a viable department, right? You can test different industries, or you can test different departments within an organization using that process, but the process is the process. Follow the buckets, measure the conversion ratios within the buckets, and use your math of sales to then determine if that's something to go deep with or not. And that's where a lot of organizations fail, because they say, hey, we don't know yet, my SDRs are figuring it out. But you're going to let somebody who's really early, a lot of the times this is like their first job, go and select who your next best customer is and tell you if it's working or not. That blows my mind, right? That's the problem there, because yes, you have to test and try new things, and new opportunities will come in front of them, but follow the process. You stick to the process, right? That's the point.
Yeah, and I think it's important to give SDRs some level of autonomy in situations like that, because I alluded to it before, but like they're the ones who are, you know, executing all of your activities. So the anecdotal information that they're getting could directly sort of influence sort of how you're bucketing stuff. And it's important for them to sort of get that opportunity. But like you said, at the same time, I've got some 22-year-old kid who doesn't know anything about my business. I'm not gonna let them pick target accounts. Like that is ridiculous to think about. But sort of on the same line, when you do have these SDRs who are ramping up, for lack of a better phrase, and maybe testing out different channels, different buckets, how long do you think you would give them to sort of figure that out? Because I know a lot of organizations kind of give up a little bit too early in testing out new target markets. And then you're also wasting time and resources with your SDR team. And that all comes back to like, you have to retrain, rehire if you do give up too early. So do you have like an idea of how long you might let somebody test out a specific set of variables for a bucket, or any insight into that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, because that's the $1 million or $1 billion, that's the unicorn question, right? Because if you can get it right and you can quickly backfill and scale, then you're going to have a successful business. If you get it wrong, you can go bankrupt, you know, if you're a startup, right? And so that's why it's so important that the executive team, at least within the hypotheses that are being run, have the buy-off, right? Yep, those are the accounts. Yep, that's the target. And yes, that's the message. Once we've nailed that, let them go. Let them have some freedom and flexibility on recommending new tests within that, but follow the process. Hey, here's something I'm learning, right? We're trying to target sales, but we're getting redirected to marketing. You know, let's have a conversation about that. Don't let them go and do that. Let's have a conversation about it. Why? Is there enough data? One conversation, 2 conversations is not enough. And by the way, 3 months, 6 months is not long enough to see the long-term impact of you know, building pipeline.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, you know, if you look at salespeople that stick around at companies for 2, 3, 4 years, they don't leave once they're past like 3 or 4 years, because it's like their jobs, it's like really easy. When they leave, it's like in their first year, because they're either failing or they're having early success. But if they just stuck through that kind of period of waiting, and that's a combination of the sales cycle and some of these things, all of a sudden your job gets easier, because the bluebirds come in from someone you talked to 6 months ago, 12 months ago. Jeb Blunt talks about the rule of 30, or I think it's called the rule of 30. What you do in this 30-day window is going to impact the next 90 days. For some, that might be the next 6 months, could be the next 12 months based on your sales cycle. And so giving it time to let it play out is one of the biggest challenges, especially startups have, because they want to see ROI right away. And for outbound sales development, like, you're not going to see ROI right away, especially in a market that's just getting hammered, right? You have to look at this and look at those ratios and have a model that helps you understand, are we converting at a rate that's acceptable based on whatever historical data we had? If you don't have the data, make up something that's acceptable and see if it's in those ranges. And it could be way off, and you can see it over and over again. But if your model doesn't work, your business model doesn't work, well, do have bigger problems. But having those ratios ahead of time to really understand, hey, I need leads to go through. I'm expecting that for every 100 accounts we talk to in this market, 10 are closing. Well, what's happening in between and how do you get there? You should have some sort of model in place to test against. Otherwise you shouldn't be in business. But so that's the thing that's hard, because time is usually the death of outbound, because people don't give it long enough.
Yeah.
But if you follow the process, you have the ratios, you'll know where you're at along the way. And if you have a solid model, we have something we call your math of sales. And for anyone listening to this, if you want a copy of this, we share it all the time, which goes through it. Like, what's your revenue target? What's your average selling price? That'll tell you how many deals you need per month. And based on how many deals you need per month, we'll actually reverse engineer how many calls you need to make, how large your list needs to be, based on conversion ratios from dial to connect, email response, success rate, show rate, accepted rate, and close rate. If you don't have those numbers yet, you at least have a model based on some averages, and then you start inputting them, and it'll give you a model over time.
I really love this discussion about testing, and I wish more people implemented this in sales development. I've seen it without it being organized or structured. Testing can get out of hand and become really time consuming, or it could be just, the golden tickets to growth. And so what I want to back up to is specifically one challenge of testing, and that's communication between that manager and that group of reps who, there's going to be knowledge gaps, there's going to be communication gaps, and it's the manager's responsibility to bridge that and to understand that, and then to translate that into actionable improvements for the team. And so with that in mind, how do you think through structuring and communicating this testing process that should be ongoing, but let's say someone's just getting started? How would you get started on communicating this to reps to ensure optimal improvements?
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, with the amount of we talked about the technology, right? The amount of technology that's coming into market, you have tools like Outreach and SalesLoft and others out there that will allow you to like ABC multivariate test the crap out of a sequence. And the reality is, like, there's too much testing for the volume of signals that you're getting from that. So they're like split testing four different subject lines and 2 different call to actions in the exact same sequence for 100 people. And then they're saying, oh, I got a better open rate on, the difference between a 25, it's split tested between 25 emails. It's like, that's not statistically relevant. And, the difference between one reply and another is the winner here. And if you just followed up one more time or picked up the phone, you might get 2 times that just based on your targeting. It has nothing to do with what you just said on that email, right? So all that to say, it's hard because people want to be objective and they want to use the data to drive their reasoning. But the reality is we're all subjective, and we're using our guts to make decisions when we don't have information. And so I think it's a hard thing for a startup, especially, and even more proven organizations to understand how, like, what you should test and what's a valid outcome from that test. And so that's why we harp bucket so much, because you've got to run through, and the most important thing is, are we targeting the right people? Are we saying the right thing? And it's so important to keep that consistent on a campaign basis with a large enough audience to have real informed objective outcomes. And we're not using our gut to make decisions through the process. So if you're selling in a market that has a long sales cycle, it's really hard to sit back and let the data play out, because your gut's telling you all these different things. And if you're listening to your reps, where it's hard, right? It's going to be hard, right? Our job is to be told no 9 out of 10, 19 out of 25, 19 out of 20 times, like 5 to 10%, we are in the Hall of Fame. Success. That means 9 out of 10, 19 out of 20 times people are telling us a lot of shitty things, right? Like, F off, get out of here, not me, not now, whatever. You feel like it's not working, but it's those small numbers of successes that are actually what we're looking for. And that's why the model's so important, the process is so important, and trying to get back to those small conversion ratios. And a no is just as good as a yes, so long as it's within reason. So kind of skirting around, how do you do that? Yes, it's the manager's responsibility, but the reality is, like, most people in sales aren't, they don't have a mathematics background, right? They're not statisticians, and they're not going to be able to provide real objective outcomes based in the scientific method that most people want to say they know. And so we tend to see too much subjective outcomes and not objective outcomes come to the surface because of these small, quick silver bullet wins that come out of the tests versus the long-term sustainable commitment to the process that produces the long-term results. So I don't know if that answers it completely, but that's a big problem.
Yeah,
it really is.
And I think that it even goes back to something you mentioned earlier, where a lot of times organizations that have an SDR team, most of them are there either for like a year or for 4. And with the ones who are there for a year, you're catching a lot of those like silver bullets, like wins that you were talking about. And it's really hard to get actionable inferences off of those. Whereas the smaller portion of your team is going to be those reps that are there for like 3 to 4 years, and they are getting a lot of data that you can get a lot of inferences out of over a long period of time. So it's like, how do you get your team to stay, which is a whole different topic and a different video to take, but how do you get your team to stay long enough to then have enough data to form these objective opinions? Because while objective opinions are great, if you're publishing some kind of like statistician work paper or whatever, trying to get information into the industry about rates that you want to portray, subjective data is good internally for you to relay to your team and for your team to relay to management. So that transparency between the two is so important to make sure that that's there. But yeah, it's just hard getting your whole team to sort of buy into that for a long period of time, because that's really what you need.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, one of the bigger challenges, you go from management all the way up to leadership, right? In the executive suite, here's a big challenge with sales development is they still think it's easy, and all they care about is the successful meetings. They don't care about all of that work that goes to get there. They don't, 95% of the work is, it was a no, and we learned a bunch from that, and there's a ton of value from that, what not to do next, what to do moving forward, all of this stuff that will be future. I don't care what you do for me today. That's the problem. That's the bigger problem in this, and getting that buy-in from the top to understand that the successful outcomes that we're having right now, that's great. Let's celebrate them. We're in sales. We have to. That's what's going to keep the lights on. But you also have to understand all of that other work that's happening to get to that successful outcome, and all the value there that's typically lost. It happens in sales. It happens on the other side of the fence as well. So many organizations will look at the wins, but they don't spend enough time looking at the losses and doing autopsies on the losses. The best organizations do, but most don't. They certainly aren't doing that in sales development, right? They certainly are. It's like, oh, meeting scheduled. Yeah. But what about like this other person who said, you should be talking to this other department, and that's happened now 10, 20, 30 times. That's a huge win for us. So those are things that I think go way up all the way to the executive suite.
Yeah. And that's probably an industry shift that will happen at some point in the near future, just because I feel like the way that we're talking about this now is so modern in terms of having SDRs like actually give operational data to management and leadership. So eventually, some big shot CMO is going to have been an SDR at some point in the past like 10 years, and they'll be the ones to be like, no, like I understand that we're taking all of the data and not just the 5%. And that's like when this will really take off. But crossing my fingers that it's soon.
I think we're there. I think we're getting closer to there anyway.
Yeah.
There are some phenomenal demand generation leaders that are emerging who get it, and I'm really, really excited to see what happens in the next 5 years with our profession because of that.
Yeah. And so to kind of jump into that, I think that's a perfect hop into to the next question. We've talked a lot about how companies and startups are scrambling to try to improve process and to really try to improve outcomes with sales development. And looking out in the next 5 years, I think we have several challenges coming along. We have this mantra of automation. We have ever-growing technology both horizontally and vertically. The technology landscape never ends. And so, in your eyes, Ryan, over the next 5 years, for a manager just starting, or maybe an SDR just starting in their role today, what do you expect, and how do you expect this space to continue changing in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that it hasn't been a better time to launch your career in sales development for a couple of reasons. One, there are so many other things you can do. Like we just said, a sales development rep today is probably going to be a CMO of the future. So the career path is very different today. It used to be a stepping stone to only become an AE, and people are starting to open their eyes around, no, this is a stepping stone to a lot of things: sales, marketing, product, future entrepreneurship, right? More and more folks are stepping out. The ease of technology and capital makes it easy for me to start a business overnight, right? Slap up a website, go do my own thing. And so you're going to see that the industry evolve to people that are not getting into this job because it's their last ditch, like, effort, right? I gotta have school. I didn't know what I was going to do. Someone said, get into sales, right? Right? You're going to see people that want to be in sales development because of these other reasons. It's scientific. You're using modern technologies. You're learning how to face rejection. You're learning how to bring a product to market. You're learning how to convince people to for their most valuable thing. It's, in my opinion, it's still harder than getting a close one deal, is taking someone's time, right? It's precious. So all those skills are it's exciting, right? It's more exciting than ever to jump into this career. From a management perspective, I think it's also going to get more and more challenging to keep people interested and motivated about the job. If the automations continue to come in, you're losing a lot of the creativity and the things that drive folks to the role, that are not just kind of that coin-operated, process-oriented individual, that more creative individual who may have those other opportunities for growth. And so there's a challenge there. Because of what it is that we need them to do. However, there's also excitement there, because you move away from the tools taking your job into becoming a master of this, and really starting to up-level the conversations and the insights and the success that you have, right? You no longer target the wrong person with the wrong message. You say the exact same thing at the right time, and more success comes out of that. So you're going to see more and more of that with machine learning and AI, supporting and not taking over the role, but like enhancing the experience with the buyer. It's really hard to say 5 years, man. 5 years from now, I've been in sales development, tech for, I think this is like my 11th year now. When I started, like, the iPhone was just coming to market, and now that's what I've seen technology do over the last that amount of time. Uber didn't exist, and it just, all these things that are crazy. Who knows what it's going to look like? But I would say in the next year or two, as a manager and what to look out for, it's like, use technology to enable the process. Don't let the process, don't let the technology define your process. Like, that's the big thing. And if you can nail that, finding the right tools to make your process work, you can find the right people and see just incredible success without all the headaches, right? Reduce churn. You could put one person, make them as effective as 10. Everyone's excited. They're around for a long period of time. You're going to see career sales development reps making a significant impact in the organizations they work for, without the pressure of having to go somewhere else. Like, this is my job. I love doing it, and here's all the value I bring to this organization. That's what I get excited about.
That's exciting stuff. I mean, I'm just imagining, like, the SDR today in, like, maybe not a CMO, but in like 5 years, there's like a whole sales development is like its own department. Because right now it's kind of rolled up under like sales or marketing, however your organization handles it. But like the specialization of the skills that you develop as an SDR could very well be its own department in 5 years, and impacting businesses in ways that we can't even imagine. So it's exciting stuff. I think you said it pretty eloquently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing about like the sales development function and what you learn, if you bring that skill set to customer success, I think maybe it's Discover or Outreach, they have this like customer success development model, like where they're using the same principles of sales development to improve the renewal and success rates of their businesses. You could see the same thing in a lot of other departments where, your job is to pleasantly drive people from wasn't aware there was something I needed to do to I need to get something done. That's sales development, right? And so how do you take that skill set and put that into other areas of the organization? So, you know, not even just in the revenue side of the house where it comes to what we think of it today, it's that skill set that can be deployed across market research to sales development to customer success, maybe even you know, actual product development and getting stuff done, right? How do you get stuff done? So it's really exciting to think about that.
The possibilities are limitless if you start the process.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome, Ryan. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible conversation about process development. And so where can the audience find you if they want to learn more about the sales developers and maybe even check out that book, Outbound Sales, No Fluff?
Yeah, anyone can connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is dash sales development representative. So
Oh, wow.
you can find me there. I've had that for a while, but it's Ryan Reiser. Sales developers, reach out. My phone number, my email's on there as well. Anyone interested in the book, hit me up, connect with me. I'll send you a free copy. And you can also learn more about it on our website, thesalesdevelopers.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep. Thanks, guys.